Hello, yes, say good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Baldwin Sports Media NFL podcast, coming to you on yet another week where we have to start on some rather tough and difficult news, as it were, both from inside the NFL world and outside the NFL world. Obviously, this weekend saw the attempted assassination of a presidential candidate over here in the USA, rather. And I'm not going to use this as a thing to take sides or make this a political thing, but I do try to stay away from politics, especially in this sort of podcast. But sad situation that it had to come to this. I'd say this again, not making this political, but glad that Donald Trump made it out. Glad that he made it out alive, purely because for him to be assassinated would be worse. I'm just putting it like that. So, and throwing the whole next couple of months into potential chaos. It's probably going to be chaotic either way. But I think this is probably the better, one of the better outcomes, shall we say. And also, we need to touch on what happened in the NFL world as well, because we also, I started off last week's episode talking about the death of Minnesota Vikings rookie Kyrie Jackson and his untimely passing, obviously before he could even get an NFL season in. But we can't start this week without also talking about Jacoby Jones, the former Baltimore Raven, Houston Texan. Played for a couple of other teams around the league, but I think that is where he is, probably going to be most remembered for. And, just a very sad situation for someone to die at the age of 40. And obviously, I'm not going to say it hits closer than the Kyrie Jackson news did, but, being a Steelers fan and the fact that he played for the Ravens, it did hit closer, because whilst he wasn't quite in the, growing up with the Steelers-Ravens rivalry, whilst he was not in the same level of, talent or impact factor, shall we say, of a Ray Lewis or an Ed Reed or a Terrell Suggs or Haloti Ngata or any of those guys, he was still a very, very important player for the Baltimore Ravens, and someone that you went into a game somewhat worried about of the impact that he can make, both on offense and primarily in special teams as well. Was obviously a part of the Baltimore Ravens Super Bowl winning team back in the 2012 season. So, a tragedy for him to be lost at the age of 40. So again, I hate having to do this 2 weeks in a row, but I do think we need to start off this show with just a period of silence and a period of reflection for the loss of a great NFL player who was taken away far too soon. I thank you for that, and as I said last week, there's no real easy way to segue into other news, but that is what we're going to have to do. So, as always, I start by thanking you very much for listening and taking part of your week to be with us. If you are new, then thank you for coming along, and don't forget you can like and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. And don't forget that we are also on social media, which is at Baldwin Sports Media on YouTube, on TikTok, and on Instagram. And on Twitter, we are at MRB Sports Media. And as I always say to those of you who are returning, thank you very much for your continued support in this effort. And I suppose we can really... there's no real way to sort of ease into this, because there are some more light-hearted topics to talk about. But again, big news over the weekend concerning Jordan Addison, again a Minnesota Viking. Twice in 2 weeks that we're talking about the Minnesota Vikings for negative reasons, but that is the NFL landscape as it is right now. And Jordan Addison, arrested for a DUI offense over the weekend, and I'm not going to get into the legalities of DUIs in if it was his fault, if it wasn't his fault, whatever. They're a very serious matter, but now the impact does come on to what is it going to do for him and the Minnesota Vikings indeed moving forward. And I just want to touch on this report that I saw from Pro Football Network's Jose Caswell, who breaks down the situation in a in a pretty good way. So as he lines out, this is not Jordan Addison's first run-in with law enforcement, because he was found guilty of speeding last year ahead of his rookie season. And as Jose Caswell points out of this, some of the details around that are going to be pretty crucial to what happens moving forward with Jordan Addison. So this is direct from his report on Pro Football Network. So he says, in Addison's first go-around with the law, he was not suspended under the NFL's personal conduct policy. However, a big reason why was the fact that he was not arrested and no one was injured due to his speeding. After pleading guilty to speeding, he paid $686 in fees, while the reckless driving charge was dismissed. In this case, though, he was arrested and allegedly under the influence of alcohol. As of May 2014, the league has a policy that suspends players for one game and fines them one game check for a first DUI offence. Players only receive the suspension and fine if they are deemed legally responsible for their DUI offence. Now, so obviously there's going to be some further investigation into this. You know, he's going to have to go through the legal proceedings, as it were, before the NFL and the league as a whole. Maybe the Minnesota Vikings will impose their own sorts of fines on him, but we've got to wait for that to come through. But it does sound like there is the possibility that he will be getting a one game suspension, which in the grand scheme of things, certainly not the worst thing that could happen for him. You know, that was immediately my thought is, what is the level of suspension for this? Because if you look at what the Minnesota Vikings are said to be going through this season with the transition at quarterback, moving away from Kirk Cousins and, starting off by the sounds of it with Sam Darnold and then moving on to JJ McCarthy at some point, you would think that someone like Jordan Addison, who is a very, very good wide receiver and can offer, a great number two to someone like Justin Jefferson, he was always going to be a very, very crucial part in how the Minnesota Vikings approach this upcoming season. So the fact that it looks as if it's only going to be one game, again, this is not the most serious issue in it. The fact that, he was driving under allegedly driving under the influence. And again, at least no one appears to have been hurt in this situation is a good thing. That is always the first and foremost, most important issue in all of these. But again, speaking purely from the football side, the fact that it's only going to be one game is, can be seen as a pretty good thing, because they are going to need him this season, whether it be for Sam Darnold to, help bridge the gap, or for JJ McCarthy to have someone reliable, a number of people reliable to throw to and work with. You look at that offensive receiving core, not just Justin Jefferson, but also you look at TJ Hawkinson as the tight end, one of the best tight ends in the league. N'Keal Harry as well, I think, could be pretty good. There's a lot of pieces there to work with. Aaron Jones as well, just taking a look back down the roster. Any piece is going to be important for them, and the fact that they, by the sounds of it, are only going to be missing for one game is, they got off lucky. Let's just put it that way. Right, and now we move on to the more lighter-hearted subjects of the show. Hopefully the first 10 minutes or so weren't too heavy for you, and we can carry this on and turn this into the podcast that we always hoped it would be. So something that caught my eye, and it may have caught my eye previously, but the fact that I am in all-star mode because of, as I talked to you about last week, the Paul Skeens situation, the fact that he's going to be starting for the National League tonight, and there is the possibility that he could face Aaron Judge depending on how the first inning goes, and that is the matchup that everybody wants to see. Is Paul Skeens against one of the best home run hitters in the whole of Major League Baseball, and Aaron Judge. But anyway, so I've got all-star games in my mind, and then these comments that Joe Burrow made recently sort of intertwined in a way, so we can talk about them. So he was talking about the idea of, as we talked about on this show a couple of times, the NFL moving to an 18-game schedule and what that would mean. And I've always said that, I'm not the only one to say it. I'm not saying this is my idea, but if you go to 18 games, you probably need to have a second bye week in there to make the players a little bit, make it a little bit easier on the players. And he appeared on Pardon My Take, which is a podcast from Barstool Sports, and he effectively put out into the ether the idea that if you are going to have 18 games as the regular season, and you are going to have this second bye week, he put forth the idea to make the bye week, or use the bye week rather, for the Pro Bowl. Now, when I first heard this idea, I've heard the idea of a Pro Bowl being put in mid-season, like the NHL, like the Major League Baseball, like the NBA does. I've heard it talked about before as an idea, as a concept. And I've always thought there's no real point for it, because you're judging with baseball and ice hockey and basketball, you're using about 35 games worth of ice hockey and basketball. You're using about 35 games worth of data. For baseball, you're looking about, by the time opening is closed or whatever, you're looking at around sort of 80 games worth of data and highlights or whatever to look at to make your votes. And with the NFL, if you were to put it mid-season, in week 10, say, then you're only going off 8 or 9. And is that really a good sample size to judge who the best or most deserving player is for the Pro Bowl? So I was never really for it. However, given the way the Pro Bowl has gone now, when I first heard that, I must admit I had that idea. I first heard that idea a couple of years ago, and it was on The Herd with Colin Cowherd. And they were talking about unpopular sports opinions, and one of the suggestions was to put the Pro Bowl in the middle of the season. And I said, it just didn't seem right. A, for the 8-9 game factor, but also, would you want to have a full padded, even though it's not quite as, full contact as as a normal game is, would you want to have that in the middle of the season? It seems like an injury situation waiting to happen. However, given the way the Pro Bowl has gone, and it's not an actual game, it's the flag football, it's the skills competition, it's now everything around it. I'm kind of agreeing with Joe Burrow on this now. Again, is it quite the same amount of games you can get? No, but at the same time, does it really matter now? Because it is just going to be for fun. It's not full contact. You can, and because it's a popularity contest in a sense, there will be stuffing the ballot boxes, as it were. There will be all these things. But let's have flag football in the middle of the season. Let's break it up a bit. Just give everyone, you've got the first couple of weeks, everyone's still a bit nervous, everyone's still trying to work out exactly what it was. Let's have a little bit of fun to reset our minds, shall we say, before we move on to the business end of the season, post Thanksgiving and, get into December and January for the tough part of the season. And put the Pro Bowl in the middle of the season and give these players, those who aren't invited will get their full rest. Those who are invited, it's not the most strenuous thing. There's as I say, there's no contact, so they can. It's effectively, I'd like to say it's not half bye week, but it's a quarter of a bye week, because there will still be stuff going on. Can someone potentially twist their ankle playing the dodgeball, for instance? Or maybe an offensive lineman does something when they're doing the tug of war. There is still going to be that slight risk of injury. It's not going to be totally there, but it's still a slight risk. So that's why I say it's about a quarter of a bye week. So they will have to be doing some conditioning and stuff all the way through. But put the Pro Bowl in the middle of the season. I'm with Joe Burrow on this. Let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment on the social media handles, which I'll leave at the end of the show, or you can go back and listen to what I said at the start of the show. But do you think the Pro Bowl should be in the middle of the season? Just give us that break, give us that second bye week, so that we can then go to 18 games. It kind of all works out, doesn't it? I think it works out perfectly. And from there we move on to slightly more serious news, but now we're getting into actual football news, not proposed. Well, I suppose this is a proposed fantasy sort of idea. And it concerns the potential future of Las Vegas wide receiver Davante Adams and a potential reunification with Aaron Rodgers, who was his quarterback with the Green Bay Packers, with the New York Jets. Now, I have spoken about the New York Jets before, and I've said that the most important thing that they need to do is to protect Aaron Rodgers. If they are going to go all in on this season, then the important thing to do is to protect Aaron Rodgers and keep him up wide, because they have some very good weapons, to work with. You look at, Alan Lazard, great player, Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, I think, is going to be tremendous for them. So they have the weapons and the great quarterback to work with. Now the most important thing, as I say, is to protect him. And if you look, their first round pick was Olaf Fashanu, an offensive lineman. They went out and grabbed Morgan Moses and Tyron Smith back during free agency. So you could argue that they have done that job in a sense. They did what they could to protect Aaron Rodgers, and now they just need to make sure that he stays upright. But if they are truly going all in on this season, and I've said before, I think that this season is the crucial one, because I don't see how Aaron Rodgers, as much as he might want to believe it and he might want to say, just me personally, I don't think he's going to be playing beyond this upcoming season. Just with the age factor and the injury he suffered last year, I think if you get that injury when you're earlier on in your career, you can come back. Getting it at the age he did, I just think that's going to take too much of a strain on him. So it has to be all in on this season. So if you are the New York Jets, go out and do it. Screw it. Go out and get Davante Adams. And Boomer Esiason has sort of thrown out an interesting caveat into all this. Speaking on WFAN rather, in New York, he talked about when a trade is likely to happen. And I think this also sort of plays into the New York Jets' hands as well, because he's talking about. This was his quote on WFAN. The dead cap for the Raiders this year is $40 million if they traded Adams. I'm hearing that this is going to happen, if it does happen, in late August or early September. And the cap hit for him is $25 million. So it sounds as if there is an avenue for this to happen. And also, whilst I have spoken about, getting everything right in terms of training and wanting players to be in early for training camp and mini camp and OTAs, so that you can get, especially if you're new or you have a new offensive coordinator or a new head coach, you want to be in early so that you can have as much repetition and get as used to the system as possible before the start of the season. However, when it comes to Davante Adams, he knows Aaron Rodgers inside out, and Aaron Rodgers knows him and vice versa. So the New York Jets can afford to let this linger just that little bit. They don't have to be desperate for it. They don't have to go out and trade for him now. If they want to let the price say, okay, we do want him, but then just let the trade value go down that little bit. This could work out for them. And if they do, then I think the AFC East becomes the most interesting division in all of football. I think I said that about the AFC North, but there is the element of that because, all those teams look to be playoff contenders. You can't say the same about the AFC East because I don't think the New England Patriots are there just yet. But in terms of who is going to be battling it out for that crown, you look at the Buffalo Bills, you look at the Miami Dolphins with what they can do. As long as they get enough of a head start and get the good results in and the wins on the board in September, October, and November, because we know what they're like in the cold weather. If they can get those wins on the board and put up something, they'll be challenging for the crown. If the Jets can get Davante Adams, would that make them the favourite? Because you look at that defense is still pretty stellar. That can go up against pretty much anyone in the league. Then you add that offense to it. Who stops the New York Jets? Does anyone stop the New York Jets? Again, we sort of all some of us may have thought that last year when Aaron Rodgers came in, with the added impact. Now, we saw how that turned out. But if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy and they get Davante Adams, who wins the AFC East? Because you can't write off Buffalo. Whilst they have Josh Allen, you cannot write off Buffalo. You can't write off the Dolphins because of that incredible offense. And as I said, they can get the wins banked early. And if everyone stays healthy on the New York Jets, you can't write them off either. I think that then becomes the most interesting division in football. I don't know. It might just be me. Maybe I'm trying to be like, unconscious bias or whatever, or unconscious unbiased because I don't want to be talking too much about the Steelers division. Maybe I'm trying to give a little bit too much credit to them to sort of throw off the scent. Maybe that's what you want to accuse me of. But I genuinely think that if everyone stays healthy in the AFC East, that division I think is the most up in the air. I don't know. I don't know about you, but that's what I think anyway. But yeah, if you're the New York Jets, go out and get Davante Adams because it's got to be all in for this season with Aaron Rodgers. But even if this season doesn't work out, you then at least have that piece for the future for whatever, for whoever your next quarterback is going to be. So this is a move that could basically see the New York Jets through for the next couple of years. To go out and do it. If you want to be serious and you want to be seen as the contenders that everyone thought you could be last year, go out and get them. Go out and get Davante Adams. And finally, one story away from the world of on-field sports, shall we say, because news emerging last night that Skip Bayless is set to leave his role as co-host of Undisputed on FS1 after 8 years with the company, and his final show will be at some point in the summer. And I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see what he does next, because with everything that's going on and I'm going to throw the name out there, this is just me sort of fantasy booking. I'd quite like to see what would happen if he went back to ESPN. Given the way that the company has gone in recent years and, some of the budget cuts they've made, whilst it might be a bit of a gamble, I think if everything can be patched up, I would love to see Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless back together. Because whilst I think Stephen A. Smith is now now carrying the show, and he's doing a great job. I'm not trying to dispute anything like that. And Shannon Sharp has been a great introduction, and all the various other guests that come on through. There's just something about Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith being the peak of First Take during the days when it all started to really started to blow up. And I think if ESPN really wants to go after the ratings and everything, whilst it might be a bit expensive, they may be able to sort of cut some form of deal. Maybe if Stephen A. Smith agrees to, there's been big numbers talked about his potential contract. Maybe if Stephen A. Smith were to take that cut and maybe give him a little bit more flexibility. I know Stephen A. Smith has often talked about, Los Angeles. Maybe they'll say, right, you can have more control. You can go back to LA. Get the band back together. I think if you bring those two back, what they have to pay in salary, they will more than get back in terms of the revenue from the ratings and the advertising, the sponsors and all that sort of stuff. So, I'm not saying that's what I think will happen. If I'm being honest, I think Skip Bayless will go out on his own. I know he has his own podcast he does now, and there's always the avenue for someone like him to be able to control what he effectively what he wants. I'm sure if CBS, if you wanted to go to CBS, say they have the sports network, I'm sure they would hand over a blank check for someone like Skip Bayless. I'm trying to think what other networks there are out there. Say he wanted to join Mike Florio on Pro Football Talk on NBC. Again, someone like him, with the ratings he brings in and the talk that's around him, I'm pretty sure they'd be amicable to do that. Skip Bayless can go wherever he wants. Or he can stay on his own thing and keep his own platform. But either way, that's what I think he's going to do. I think he's going to stay on his own. But there's just that little bit of me that says, get the band back together and go back to ESPN. Get First Take back to its glory days, shall we say? Because it was just so good back then. It's just not quite the same right now. Let's get back to that. But anyway, that is the end of this show. I want to thank you very much for listening. And again, thank you for sticking through if you did till the end after the bit of a heavy start to the show. But as I said at the top, you can follow us on social media. Like and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. But don't forget to like and subscribe. We are on Twitter or X, depending on how you word it, at MRB Sports Media, and on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, we are at Baldwin Sports Media across all three. So thank you very much for listening and making me part of your week. And until I speak to you guys next time, at this point next week. Oh, by the way, I probably should have said this at the start of the show. Apologies for getting this out on a Tuesday, but as I've sort of said before, sometimes life gets in the way, and something came up on Monday that I had to deal with. So I didn't have time to talk about anything then, but hopefully one day late hasn't thrown you off too much. But hopefully we'll be back on Monday next week. And until I speak to you again, you guys can all take care. See you later.